You can't read the yellow. I called it in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10. First clap.
Let me try with pleasure hands.
Clap. I'm gonna get you now. I can hear you breathing.
You took your blindfold off. I win. I was in Christine and Nancy's room.
There's a new horror film opening soon. You must have heard about it. You will have seen the posters, seen the adverts, read the news stories. It's called The Conjuring. And it's been in the news because it cost very little, 20 million. It took that pretty much in its first day of opening in America. And it's become a very financially successful film. It's bucked some trends because actually summer is not generally when you open big horror movies, but it's a film that has tracked very well with preview audiences and it's paid off. They've opened it in the summer and it's taken good money and it's got very good reviews. Variety really, really liked it. Loads and loads of very influential critics have sung its praises. Comparisons have been made. They said it's like The Exorcist meets Amityville meets Poltergeist, which is strange because actually I don't think those three films have got anything in common at all. The Amityville connection is fairly simple because the film is based on a true story. It's the Warrens, who are a couple who investigate paranormal activity, and they were involved in the Amityville case. And this is apparently a case that happened before that was so terrifying, so really overpoweringly scary that they kept quiet about it. They didn't publicise it until now. Now, finally, the full story can be told. And I saw the film. I saw it in a packed screening in Leicester Square in the West End of London. And, you know, I mean, I like horror films. I'm a big horror film fan. I always go into them wanting to be scared. I'd heard good things about this in advance. But here's what's interesting. I watched the film and I thought it was very flawed. I mean, I thought it was very cliched. I'd seen most of the riffs before. It did look like a collection of ideas from other films rather than being, you know, Exorcist meets Amityville meets Poltergeist. It's ideas you've seen expressed in all those films before. But it was technically perfectly well done. It did the usual thing about starting quietly and then just descending into special effects mayhem, even though all the reviews have said that it doesn't. The interesting thing was this. The audience was terribly badly behaved. They were on their phones, texting, actually talking on their mobile phones, taking calls, which was outrageous. And I can't stand that kind of behaviour in the cinema. But I do understand it sometimes in relation to horror films. I remember seeing The Evil Dead in a cinema in Manchester back in the 1980s, and the audience was incredibly noisy, largely because they were absolutely terrified. It was that classic thing with a horror movie. Something really scary would happen. Everyone would shriek, everyone would scream, and then afterwards they'd laugh and they'd sort of talk to each other to kind of calm themselves down, you know, wow, and there was a little babble afterwards. And that didn't bother me at all because that seemed to be perfectly in keeping with the way I felt about the film. I went to see it with my friend Phil, and actually we pretty much did the same thing. Something really scary would happen, then you'd turn and talk. In the case of this, however, I ended up thinking, have I outgrown the horror genre? I don't find this scary at all. It's just a series of quiet bits with loud bangs and quiet bits, but I don't believe the story and I don't believe the characters. They're very well played, incidentally. I mean, good actors, good performers who I like, but I don't believe any of it. And incidentally, I don't believe the Amityville stuff either. And yet, it was working with the audience. The audience were terribly badly behaved. They were talking, they were breaking the code, they were using their phones, they were eating the noisiest snacks available. But at every jump, they were shrieking and jumping and screaming and then doing that strange laughter thing afterwards. And it brought me to the conclusion that there's a difference between seeing a horror film as a horror fan and seeing a horror film as somebody who doesn't go to horror movies. You see, my feeling is that most of the people who are in that screening I attended don't go and see horror movies. They wouldn't have seen Field in England, for example. And in fact, if they'd started watching it, they would have been bored out of their mind. One of the scariest things I've seen recently is that scene in A Field in England. And he comes out of the tent with that demonic grin on his face in slow motion. I'm almost having nightmares about that scene. There's nothing at all in The Conjuring that I remembered more than 5 minutes after seeing the film, but it was working for everyone else. So here's what I want to know. Having seen the posters and read the newspaper articles and seen the TV ads, do you want to go and see The Conjuring? Is it a film which appeals to you? Because, you know, my feeling is that most of the people who come here to the Kermode Uncut side are probably the horror cognoscenti. I mean, probably a lot of people who really, really like horror films. So do you want to go and see The Conjuring? Does it appeal to you? And if you do go and see it when it opens, Let me know whether you found it scary. See, I found it a really strange experience of sitting there in a cinema being increasingly disconnected from the film, not being scared by it, really wanting to be scared by it, wishing that it terrified me, but it didn't. And yet, understanding that for everyone else in the audience, people who I'm pretty sure were not horror fans, people I'm pretty sure if you showed them a field in England, they'd get bored or walk out, they were jumping, they were screaming, they were shrieking. It was working for them. Why isn't it working for me? If you see the film and it scares you, tell me, what am I missing?
When the music stops, you see him in the mirror standing behind